Hello, welcome back to the podcast. And today I have another remarriage series episode for you. I'm delighted to welcome Natalie Nielsen to the podcast. Natalie and I are both coaches. We're in the same mastermind. So we talked a little bit at a conference that we were at together about her journey, and I was really excited to connect with her and bring her story to you. So Natalie, welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself, tell the listeners who you are and what you do.
Thank you, Sadie, for having me on. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Natalie Nielsen, and I divorced 14 years ago, and I have been remarried for 5 years. I was single for 9 of those years, and I have 2 kids. They're both teenagers now. And then I have 4 bonus kids, and they are between the ages of 20 and 26 now. So when we remarried, all of our kids were between like 10 and 21. So a lot of teenagers in there, a lot going on. And yes, I am a career and business coach for single moms, and I have been doing that for 2.5 years. Before that, when I divorced, I was a stay-at-home mom. Then I went back to college, landed a corporate HR job, and then eventually turned a side gig into my full-time coaching business.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. I needed you after my
I know I needed me.
I was a stay-at-home mom too. And I had helped my ex start a business, but then he kind of took it over and took it forward. And when the divorce happened, because I wasn't active in the business, he was able to just kind of take the whole business and the money. And it was just like, it was very devastating. So yeah, I had to kind of do the same thing and go back into the workforce before starting my own business. I just wanted to stop on that because I know most of the listeners are single moms, somewhere in between in those stages after their divorce. Why do we need, I just want to kind of emphasize why coaching can be so helpful for your career and your business after a divorce. Because I know I talk to a lot of women, like just on a daily basis. I'm constantly talking to divorced women. And sometimes I'll find some who want to start a relationship, but what they really need in that moment is to work on their money or to work on their career. Yeah. Not because I'm not advocating that they get a new relationship, but I can see where, hey, you should think about your career, because I'll say, hey, pay for premium on Bumble, and they'll be like, well, I can't afford that. Yeah. So why is what you do so important?
I think for me, I needed someone to show me what was happening for myself and how I didn't trust myself to be able to make decisions. I bounced around a lot with different career options and took longer in college than maybe I needed to. And then didn't have a lot of confidence when knowing my value and what I had to offer the world after being a stay-at-home mom and just not knowing my worth. And so I think so much of what I take my clients through is a process of them really being able to tap into who they are and being able to have that self-trust, and that carries you through as you pursue. Well, that opens up so many doors to really the career that you'd want to go after, not just the one that everybody else thinks you should go after, the safe one, the logical one. And it also just having that self-trust helps you as you date and meet men and pick your future spouse. It is so important to be able to trust yourself, to be able to make decisions for your life and what you want.
Yeah.
And I
totally agree.
I eventually hired a coach to help me. But yeah, I definitely wish I would have had coaching sooner.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like, even in the last 2 weeks, I coached a woman who was dating, but was unsure how to pick a guy because she kept wanting a guy to make up what was missing in her income. And so she was like, well, I need a guy who makes this much because that will make up this part of my income that I need. And I was like, well, what if you made that amount of money?
Yeah.
And then you could date with like just so much more freedom and enjoy the process more because there's not this weight of money hanging over that. Cool. All right. So
I made a decision after I divorced because I became very financially depleted. after that, and it took me a lot of years to be able to make a good income. And I made a choice that I was never going to financially depend on a husband again, that I would always be able to provide for myself. And I think that's been amazing in
Yeah.
my life and for our marriage as well.
Yes. Yeah. The way I phrased it slightly differently. I'm a little bit more sassy in the way I approach it. I said, I want
I
to make
love it.
child support play money.
Yes. Yes.
I was like, I didn't like the feeling of needing and watching for that child support to come in every month and worrying that if he didn't pay that month, something bad would happen in my household.
Yes.
I was like, I don't like that. It was not a good
Yes.
feeling.
Yeah. It's
Awesome.
amazing.
All right. So you said you were single so after the divorce, before you got remarried, you were single for 9 years.
Uh-huh.
What were your thoughts about dating during those 9 years? Like, were you dating? Were you not dating? Were you wanting someone? Were you like, I don't want anybody? What was going on there?
Well, I think it helped that we were separated for 2 years before we legally divorced, and I chose not to date during that time. And so, I mean, when I first like separated, oh, I was scared to death to go out and date and to trust again. And there had been infidelity in my previous marriage and just some things that I found out after that were happening in the marriage that I wasn't aware of. And so trust was a huge thing for me. So it scared me a lot to be able to trust a man again. And my kids were toddlers and to bring another man into their life and all of the things. So I really loved having those 2 years where I didn't date and I really just got to know myself again as an individual, not as a wife, not even as a mom. Who am I? What do I want? What do I like to do? What are things that I used to do that I haven't done for a long time, and really started to build a relationship for myself. And so um as I started that process, it was just through those 9 years, there was just such a progression of thoughts that I had, right? And then obviously I would get to the point where I had enough thoughts of like trust or like I'll try this. I'll
Mhm.
just go slowly and go on a few dates, or like I started out just kind of going on some blind dates where somebody actually knew them. It wasn't just, oh, I know a single person, you should go out with them. It was like they actually knew him and would get to know people more as a friend. And but then obviously as I gave my heart to people and the relationship didn't work out and things like that, then I would go through periods of time where I just wanted to shut the door too, where I'm like, forget it. And I would go sometimes 6, 8 months without dating,
Mhm.
where I would just focus on my kids and school and again building a relationship with myself. And so it's just such a roller coaster of emotions through the whole
Yeah.
thing.
And I totally get that. And I actually, what I do with my clients now, because all my clients do that, I literally coached a woman in the academy last night on this. She had just experienced a disappointment while dating. And then she was like, I need a break. And I was like, really? How many breaks have you taken in the last 5 years? And we talked about it. And many women will take 3-month breaks after every disappointment, which means they're dating like just 2 months out of the year, but they think they've been dating for 5 years, but really you've been dating for a couple of months every year for 5 years. And so a lot of, I think, what coaching can help with is processing that disappointment so that if you
Yeah.
are wanting a relationship, you could move like a little faster. You just be like, oh, okay, I processed that feeling, I processed that disappointment, and I can move forward. So it sounds like you were dating a lot of people that you knew, like in your network, introductions.
Yeah, and then I branched into going to single scene things. Like I went on a singles cruise. It was like
Fun.
500 people that was all singles on a cruise ship. And like I decided before I went on that cruise that I was actually just going to make a lot of friends and not like just hook up.
Mhm.
Um, and then I did start online dating. In the beginning, I would just kind of meet men, um, probably too quick, but then I started to screen them a little more and talk to them a little longer on the phone before I'd meet them in person. So you kind of learn, you really do. You have to be bad at it before you get what I call more good at it and really knowing what you
Yes.
want. And I started to really value my time. I mean,
Mhm.
I had to pay for a babysitter every time I went out. Often guys would pay for my babysitter, which I thought was amazing. But I really started to value my time and be really selective on what I went to, who I spent my time with, who I
Yeah.
talked late at night on the phone with. And but I think that that progressed as I saw my own worth and started to trust myself and started to see what was possible for me, what I was worthy of in a
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I love it. What were you worthy of? Let's get to the good stuff. Tell us what your husband is like different from what you expected or what you thought you were worthy of in your before, like when you first started dating or after the divorce, and like, oh, this is possible for me. This kind of man is possible for me.
Um, I mean, I would tell you that I'll still tell you this. I really felt like he was way out of my league, which is probably, it's not that I didn't see how much I was worthy of, but he had been married for 23 years. I was married like 7 years, and he
Mm.
was 10 years or 13 years older than me, and
Same here.
very established in a career, a motivational speaker who would travel around the world and give speeches, and he was a therapist as well, and um had basically raised majority of his kids. And so I just thought, well, how can we really relate? But I it's cool, we were friends for a couple years at work before we started dating, and I think I was always attracted to him, and I always thought, "Oh, it'd be kinda cool to go on a date with him," but I
Mhm.
never really did much about it. I just started being his cheerleader, and I just started to just be, his friend and have a lot of conversations with him, and I was even engaged to somebody else during the time that we worked together as well. And so I think it took me some time to start to see, no, we have a lot in common. We love talking, and age doesn't matter. And so he's raised his kids and I still have a lot of years left. That doesn't matter. It's like, do our futures match and what we want in our future? And our divorce stories were very similar, and the heartbreak that we went through and just really being thrown on our face. Just happened all of a sudden. It's not like we saw a divorce coming or infidelity or anything like that. And so, yeah, it took some time to, I think, see that this could really be possible for me. And definitely I had coworkers and my boss who were like, you should really get to know him. And my boss would put us on these projects, and I'd be like, hey, this is not in my job
Oh,
description
wow. This is
at
okay. So
all. And
that's a strategy that I haven't used with my clients yet. Get your boss to put you on
yeah.
projects with the cute coworker.
And then when we started dating, because I was just still in college when I met him, and I was just a receptionist at a counseling center, and he was a counselor there.
Wow.
And after we started dating, I started to really know that this is the person I want to be with. And he was really dragging his feet. And I got offered this like amazing corporate job that would move me like an hour and a half away. And I took it, where I was just like, okay, I didn't break up with him, but I kept living and
You
I
kept
kept
moving on with
building my
your life.
life and going after the things that I wanted, and
Yeah.
let him be where he was at, not put pressure on that. And that was a really good thing for us, because we dated a year and a half before
Okay.
we got married. And I think with blending and everything, it was really good for us to
Yeah.
date that long.
So I have a couple of questions. One is, so how did the conversation change? Like one day your friends, like what was in that conversation that flipped it to, hey, we're going on a date? Like, did you bring that up? Did he bring that up? What happened? Like, how did it become conversation, date?
Um, well, I think I started to do more things for him. Like I remember I left something on his car for like his birthday. Like I got him like, some kind of pastry or something like that. And so I think he started to see like, oh, she's
Basically,
like
you made the first,
interested
you
in me.
basically made the first move.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of thing a guy would do if he was
Yeah.
interested.
And I had a guy friend that would kind of coach me along where he's like, guys are kind of dumb. And you got to realize this guy was married for 23 years and he's like a little boy again with
Yeah.
dating. And you kind of have to really let him know that you're interested in him and have it be a little more bold. And I was just like, yeah, but I'm not the type to make the first move or to ask him out. And I had all these rules. And so I didn't ask him out, but I started making more gestures like that.
Well, you asked him out, just not verbally.
Yeah. And how we ended up, he claims this was our first date, and I don't claim it was our first date. Our boss got laid off. One of our bosses got laid off, and it was right around Christmas. And I wanted to do a sub for Santa for this boss. And so I emailed everybody at our workplace just saying, hey, who would like to get together and do this sub for Santa? And everyone wanted to donate, but my husband actually wanted to come along and buy the stuff with me and go and deliver it. And so he kind of turned that into a date where then he asked me out after. And then after that, then he started taking initiative, but he was still really slow. Like he didn't even kiss me for 3 months. And I'm like, maybe he doesn't like girls, and that's okay. But like, I
need to know what's going on.
But again, my boss would even help me where he's like, maybe you need to like help him along with that. With the first kiss, again, he's like this little boy who doesn't know how to date. He's been married for a long time. So yeah, it took a lot of
It sounds like you did have coaches. It sounds like your coworkers
were like
really savvy, and they knew what to tell you to do. I love that. Yes. The other question on that was, I wanted to highlight and kind of ask you, like, what's the difference between, because I hear you in friendship with a healthy man, making the first move, being patient and giving it time for him to come on board. And in your case, that was healthy and that worked out. But there are many women who try to do the same thing and then it doesn't work out. And they end up with these men who are afraid of commitment or, emotionally unavailable, or just like immature men who are just wanting the woman to do all the work in the relationship. Like, how did you know the difference? How did you know, okay, I can give this person time, versus a lot of my listeners who are like, well, this person is nice and we like each other, but he's dragging his feet, and maybe they give him time and then it ends badly.
Yeah. And I had dated other guys like that where it felt like I was doing more of the work, and they'd be uncommitted, or like I had one guy, he'd date me for a few months and then he'd go and date somebody else for a few months and then want to come back and then go away and then come back. And I got to the point where I set boundaries where it was like, hey, I'm not going to have you be around my kids. We can be friends, but I'm not looking to just date for fun at this point. And so I think you know enough about me to where you could make a decision that we step into a committed relationship. With my now husband, I did give it time, but like when I made a decision to go after that career that would move me, I had a conversation with him about that, where it was like, if you are more serious about this and about our relationship, and depending on where you're at, like I initiated a conversation about where we're at in our relationship, and we decided we were progressing towards marriage, but we weren't to that point where we could not have me take this amazing opportunity. And so I did still lead the conversations and set boundaries. And I know that it's hard to do that as a woman. You don't want to do that, and you don't want to have the hard conversations, but it can just drag on for a long time. And you want to spend your life with somebody and have that companionship, and you don't want to keep dating somebody where it's not going anywhere. And so I think that's why I did still work towards this relationship, because I felt like it was going somewhere, and maybe it was me that had to initiate more of those conversations. But he stepped up to the plate after I had the conversations.
Yes,
and he would step into that role because he knew that was important to me, and he didn't want to lose me.
Yeah, that's the big difference is that, I mean, it doesn't really matter who initiates or who initiates the conversation, as long as the conversation gets had and there's an understanding and both people actually participate materially in building the relationship and in contributing to moving it forward to where it needs to go. Like you're on the same page. And I think the other type of person creates a lot of confusion. So if you're experiencing a lot of confusion with a guy, chances are he's not going to be there, or you need to have the conversation and bring in a little more clarity, or get clear yourself. Like, what do I want? And, checking as to whether or not you're moving your life forward or you're waiting for this person to commit to you before, starting your life. Like, there's so many factors that go into it. But I really love your story. And I want to, I thank you for, kind of creating that clarity between the two, because I think there's just so much confusion in the dating world where we try to take someone's story and we try to like place it on someone who isn't the same person as is in that story. All right. So you met at work, you started making the first move. How did you know he was the one? Like, you liked him. And I know you spent a lot of time together, but you talk about like having to rebuild trust that the person could be there for you and could be faithful and could be reliable. Like, at what point did you say, yeah, this is the one, I'm going to commit? Because dating is one thing, or being exclusive with someone is one thing. Actually signing on the dotted line, again, is quite another.
Yeah. And I knew that we had a lot in common and I loved being around him and knew that our personalities matched, but there's a lot that I think I had to work through as well with having 4 kids. And he lived in the same town as his ex-wife, and there was a lot of combined functions they still did together, and then his different businesses and different things like that. There was a lot for me to wrap my head around, right? And I gave myself time to figure that out. I didn't just push him aside and just say, I can't deal with teenagers and I can't deal with the dynamic he has with his ex-wife. I mean, I had done some combined things with my ex-husband as well, and I was grateful they had a really peaceable relationship, right? And so, but I think what helped me is I had been in some really difficult relationships, and I just realized that no matter who you pick, you're going to take on a certain amount of hard, but you get to pick what hard you're going to deal with. And he was the one that I felt that I could do it with. Where it was like, I don't know how to be a stepmom to these kids that are, his oldest son is only 15 years younger than me. I don't know how to be a stepmom to these kids, but I know how to do it with him. He's the one I want to do it with. And I don't have to have it all figured out, but I'll figure it out in time.
Yeah. Yeah. And
right? I didn't know how to be a single mom, and I figured it out.
Yeah.
And we're still figuring it out.
So, and it's the same thing with dating. It's like, I know a lot of people want to know exactly how is it going to go? What app is going to get the guy, and how am I going to have the conversation? What am I going to type in text that's going to get him to commit to me? And I'm like, there's no way to know. Like, you just have to get out there. But it's a lot easier when you have someone helping you, when you have a dating coach helping you, when you've done therapy and you're more emotionally regulated. It's a lot easier. But the path, you just got to go through those phases of not knowing what you're doing and then figuring it out. And I love that you also said it's going to be hard, but you choose your hard. I used to think that my first marriage was just like a normal kind of hard. And now when I look back, I'm like, okay, that was like the hard of like being in a hostage situation with a terrorist. Like, that's hard. But the hard I have now is like, hey, let's get on the same page about this. Let's bring the differences in our personalities together to create the goals. Let's make time. I think that's a big one for my husband and I, is making time for the building that we want to do. Like, all of that is hard. Understanding our children's personalities. I still have some custody stuff going on that he participates in with me. So all of that is hard, but nothing like the hard that I had before. Like, I like to say it's a productive hard. Like, when we dig in, into the work, we see the results. Like we feel good. We're like, oh, look what we did. We read that book and we did that work and we had that conversation either with ourselves or with our kids or whatever. And we got this really good outcome afterwards. So yeah, I love that. That's so good. All right. So in your like growth in trusting in coaching, I know you did a lot of work and then you became a therapist. So that's kind of like doing the work as well.
I became a coach. He was a therapist. I didn't become
He was a therapist. Okay.
Yeah.
You became a coach. You've seen so much like work. When you think about a woman who's like just maybe more recently divorced or it's in the middle of her dating journey, what are the things that like, I don't want to say tools or like concepts that really propelled you forward in that growth journey? I know for me, one was like just goal setting really did a lot for me, and I would visualize and focus on my goals, and that led me to more work, that led me to where I am. But I always refer back to that first time that I wrote 100 goals when I was living in this like really horrible little farmhouse that I was the only thing I could afford, and that just gave me the visual that got me here to all the other tools along the way. Do you feel like there was maybe one or two things that really propelled you forward?
I think for me, a huge thing was I journaled a lot. I journaled a lot of what I wanted my life and my future relationship to look like, and about the person that I felt like I wanted to become to attract the kind of person that I wanted in my life. I journal a lot when things weren't going well, and I think would try to look at it from a perspective of how does this get me a little closer to the person I'm supposed to be with, because I don't think I would have picked him a year after my divorce. I think because of all the things of being in a lot of the wrong relationships and learning to trust myself as I said no to a lot of relationships, prepared me to be ready for him and to trust myself to be able to make that decision. And so I was constantly working on myself and stepping into that vision for myself. Like what could I believe about my life and about my future relationship and what I'm worthy of? And I stopped putting pressure on myself to find the person, but I also held myself to certain things. I got to the point where I didn't take long breaks, where it'd be like, okay, I'm going to go to 2 singles activities this month. And that's what I feel like I can do. Right. And so I started holding myself to things as well. And I think just starting to be really selective, I think that that's what got me a lot closer to finding, well, that's what got me married, was being a lot more deliberate in who I went on dates with. I mean, I remember like walking out on a date literally in the first 20 minutes. He was talking about like, I don't know, like his G.I. Joe toys or something like that. We met online, and I was paying a babysitter, and I was like, oh, it was so nice to meet you, but I'm going to need to go.
I love it.
And I valued my time, right?
Yes.
I didn't tell my clients because I was a pleaser.
I tell my clients, listen, if you have to like escape through the bathroom or whatever, do it. Whatever you got to do. If you get there and it's terrible, leave. It's okay to leave.
I stopped also dating guys because there were those guys that would just pursue a lot, and I knew the relationship wouldn't go anywhere. And it was easy to just have that. It was fun to have someone who sent you texts every day, that built you up and that pursued you and left gifts on your door. But I started putting boundaries on that, where it's like, no, I'm dating because I want to get married someday. Yes, I didn't know when.
Because there's the pen pal scene where they just want to talk endlessly. They're using the app and people on the app sort of as their comfort, as their security blanket. And as long as you're willing to be the security blanket, then that's all that you get. I wanted to ask you, like, when you're dating after divorce, it's hard to visualize like what it's like to be married again. And it's because like what we know, and not consciously, but subconsciously, what we know of marriage was just all the stuff that happened in our marriage. And I think like what you talked about with journaling, did you ever do, this is something I take my clients through, did you ever do any journaling of what life would be like in that new relationship? Like,
I probably did. I don't remember distinctly doing that, but I remember just driving in my car a lot in silence and really, really thinking about it. And, my kids and how they would work well with his kids. And I moved to the town that he lived in. So I left my job and got a new job and moved to where he was at because his kids were in high school. Mine were still in elementary. So it was a little easier for me. But I spent a lot of time, and I didn't know about coaching at that point, but I did have a therapist that I talked through a lot with.
Yeah.
And concerns that I had, and I think helped me. I don't know if I'll be honest, I don't know if I would have married him without a therapist or a coach helping me through it, because there was enough things that I was scared of, and I was very happy and very comfortable being single, and I was okay to stay single as well if that's how the cards turned. So having somebody show me my brain and the things that were really keeping me from, putting 2 feet forward into the relationship was
Yeah.
just priceless.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can totally see that. It's not like you don't know what you don't know. Right.
Yeah.
So when you've rebuilt your life and you've got your money, you've got your profession, maybe even your business, it's like, this is good. The thought is, why would I ruin it? Why would I ruin it by bringing something in? And I think that's why I teach my clients to revisualize what married life looks like, because in that moment when you're single and comfortable, the thought of a relationship, I think most people feel like, oh, it's going to ruin what's going on well right now. Versus, what if there's that 1 in 50 guy or 1 in 100 guy who will enhance what I have? So not just like, oh, this is great, I'm going to protect it. It's how good can it get? And can I multiply? And I know that's a stretch. And I've been through that stretch where it's like, oh, I can't. I'm looking around and some of my friends are married to guys and they're still married, but it's not great, right? My marriage wasn't great. There's maybe 1 or 2, depending on what your network looks like. So I can see where it's like, I don't want to ruin this, but I also want to encourage women to say, if you did want a relationship, it can be good. You just have to learn how to choose that guy who seems like he's out of your league, but is exactly what you want. All right, so this is my last question. I really just want to acknowledge the fact that you did a lot of things that people are scared to do. And I know you've mentioned it, kind of sprinkled it in, but I was like, this is pretty impressive. You went on a singles cruise. You held yourself to going to 2 singles events a week. You were dating online. You were open. It sounds like you were open to people hooking you up on blind dates with people that they knew. Like, it's like you're doing like my whole strategy here, because I teach my clients to do both. I'm like, you've got to work your network. You've got to get out there doing things you love, that you enjoy with new people, and you've got to be online. So I teach them how to sort of open up their world to bring in new people and new experiences so that they're in that energy and they're rebuilding their lives. But then you did all of that and then you met him at work.
I know.
Right?
When I wasn't really I wasn't
right. Yeah.
looking at that point. I wasn't. He really was just a friend.
Yes. And
It's not like I met him and said one day I'm going to marry him.
Oh yeah. 100%.
It was like, wow, he's
it's
really
always that
good
kind of
looking and cool,
unexpected.
but I'm going to be his friend.
Yeah. It's that unexpected. It always seems like it comes in that unexpected way. But then I also believe that everything you did leading up to that point, made that happen. Even though you can't draw a direct line between your singles cruise and meeting your husband at work. Like, what are your thoughts about that? I just have a theory around it.
I just feel like when it happened for me, it's not that it was like the right circumstance. I definitely feel like I dated some fantastic guys. I really did. I don't have a lot of horror stories, right? I just don't think I had the relationship with myself that was ready
Mm,
for it to go somewhere else, right? And trust in myself. And I definitely don't feel like it takes 9 years. If I would have had a coach, I definitely coaching wasn't the way that it is now, where it's a lot more well known and there's podcasts out there and so much online help for, divorced women. Um, but yeah, and I just feel like I got to the point where, yeah, I was still growing, but I didn't want my life to just be easy, because when it's easy, you're not growing. And marriage, it shows you certain sides of yourself and pieces of yourself, and you do grow a lot in a marriage. I think personally it is a lot easier to just stay single and to not grow and
mm,
to be comfortable. But I made a choice that I didn't want that for my life. My parents never divorced, and they didn't always have a perfect relationship, but they had each other. They got to grow old together, and I wanted that.
yeah,
And even with the challenges that I knew that would come
I
with
love that.
blending.
That is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Is there anything else about your story or journey you'd like to share? I just really, really appreciate you sharing this, because I think your story is like so real about all the elements that go into this journey. And I know the listeners are probably like just really excited to hear everything you're saying. Anything else that maybe I didn't ask?
I think if I could go back to that person the me who divorced, I think just it is a journey, and don't be so hard on yourself, right? And anything that happened in your first marriage, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen in your next relationship, in your second marriage, or if you call them mistakes, right? I don't look at them as mistakes. I was doing the best
Learning
that I
opportunity.
could. I was the best wife I knew how to be at that point in my life. And and then when relationships that I really had hopes for would not work out, I spent a lot of time really beating myself up over that and regrets, and instead of just loving myself through it, and that I showed up in the best way I knew how, and that this would just help me get closer to finding the person that I wanted to be with. And so just have grace on yourself, be patient, and I think taking that pressure off of yourself to be a certain person for these men. I would meet those men where they wanted someone that was like Cindy Crawford and like the perfect mom and all of this stuff, and I would try to fit into that mold. But it's like when I started attracting the kind of person I wanted to be with was when I just started being me, the authentic me, and I stepped into that and stopped putting pressure on myself to be something that I'm not.
I love it. So good. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for being on the podcast. Could you please tell the listeners where they can reach you and maybe spell out, a couple of your
Yeah.
handles so that those who won't go to the page can just look you up and follow you on social media?
Yeah. So on Instagram or Facebook, it's just at Natalie Nielsen, Nielsen coaching. And I also have a private Facebook group. It's Single Mom Career and Business Coaching.
Okay.
And so that's a fun Facebook page. It's just free. And thank you for having me on this podcast.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for your time and attention today. Please follow Natalie on Instagram and Facebook. Find her Facebook group, Single Mom Career and Business Coaching.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so just search for that on Facebook, join the group. I know many of you could probably take advantage of her work in moving your careers forward, or if you're starting a business after your divorce, please check Natalie's work out. Thank you, Natalie. Have an
Thank
amazing
you.
day.